Hey, YouTube world, we are back once again. So happy to be here. So please download all the episodes below. This platform has kind of been used to break down like the spur of the moment news of the day, like kind of impromptu speaking. And this time we have one that may not qualify as that, but it still falls under the same category. So this morning it was reported on KFAN, I may have that wrong, but radio reporter says that Odell Beckham and the Minnesota Vikings, or the Vikings are working out a trade for Odell Beckham that could consist of a second and a fifth round pick, potentially going back towards Minnesota, and that nothing had been confirmed up to this point. And this is a fascinating idea. Regardless of whether the trade's happening or not, we can't break down the exclusive details yet, but we are fans of the transaction. All of us are. We love the idea of the changing landscape and who's winning in an agreement, in a back and forth, because that's where we find advantages in our sport. It's the easiest way for us to comprehend advantages without looking at the X's and O's of the game and not having the nuanced understanding of, say, an Andy Reid or a Bill Belichick. So we love the transaction, and Odell Beckham may be on his way to Minnesota for a second and a fifth round pick after the Vikings moved Stephon Diggs for a first, a fourth, and 2 sevenths, I believe was the details of that deal. And boy, oh boy, Minnesota, this may backfire on you. Cleveland, you bought high, you got burnt, and now you're selling low. And that is why the Browns are the Browns, and why, well, I guess the Vikings are the Vikings. So if you had to guess between those two, I mean, overall, you want to say the Vikings are in a better position on this trade. I also want to just point out the fact that Bill O'Brien is strutting around his house this morning after seeing that, because he got the same second-round pick and David Johnson for DeAndre Hopkins, a guy who is a top 3 receiver in the league, which Odell Beckham was by most people's definition at the time he got traded. So Bill O'Brien is happily strutting around his office because Bill O'Brien was not dumb to trade DeAndre Hopkins and was not dumb to get the value he got back for him. It's not that Bill O'Brien is dumb, it's that everyone else is making bad moves, overpaying for these wide receivers. And the Browns are the encapsulation of that because they gave up essentially 2 first-round picks for Odell Beckham at a position that, other than running back, is the least valuable on the football playing field, at least when it comes to winning games. Now, bringing in publicity and ticket value, that's a different story. Obviously, wide receivers are probably the most popular position other than quarterbacks on the field in terms of someone who's watching as a fan. It's the reason that the main positions on your fantasy football team are quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, despite the fact that the quarterback is one of the most valuable positions, despite the fact that if you can get value at the position, it makes everything easier. The running back and wide receiver are the 2 least valuable positions in the league. So the Browns got burnt on the Odell Beckham trade last year, and now they find themselves in a position where they want to make the move to Minnesota and try and recoup some of those assets, shed some salary, and maybe move on from what became a tough situation last year. I don't know if it was the fact that much of a rapport was made by Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham, or whether it's just the fact that the situation didn't work from the Baker Mayfield standpoint, whether Odell and Jarvis Landry didn't work out. Overall, I think the Browns just suffered from a bad year from Baker Mayfield. I don't know if it was the connection issue or if it was Baker's shortcomings that were really the indicative point of that. But regardless of what the situation is, the fact that Odell's market is finally being corrected is the important thing for Cleveland going forward. And Minnesota and the league as a whole for teams like the Cardinals, who traded for DeAndre Hopkins with Bill O'Brien. The fact that Brandon Cooks got traded for basically the right to move up 2 rounds in the draft. It's moves like that that kind of show that the wide receiver market is correcting itself, and the running backs are correcting themselves, despite the fact the Panthers signed Christian McCaffrey, but the Panthers are one of the most lost organizations in the NFL. So if this trade comes into fruition, I think, so one of a player from Minnesota is going to have to go out. I thought the Browns were connected to Anthony Harris, and then I thought they wouldn't give up Anthony Harris and a second-round pick and a 5th-round pick to get Odell Beckham, because Anthony Harris might actually be more valuable to winning than Odell Beckham is. So that trade wouldn't consummate. Maybe that's part of the issue, because it seems like the Vikings really want a receiver and the Browns really want a safety, and the Vikings have a safety to give up and the Browns have a receiver to give up. Both of them are highly expensive, and neither team wants to give an inch on either of them, because they fear that, well, at least in Minnesota's sake, that giving up Anthony Harris for Odell Beckham is not a fair trade in terms of trying to build out that roster. Minnesota is only about $1.5 million over the cap, so they would have to either cut a player, which can get them under that cap, or they can, ship a player over to the Browns in that deal who's making more than $1.5 million, obviously. So regardless of that situation, or they could actually trade him to another team and get a draft pick in return, whoever that player may be. If that trade comes into consummation, Odell Beckham represents the Stephon Diggs type, and he's a better version than whatever you're going to get with a draft pick in the first round, whether it be Jalen Reagor, whether it be Denzel Mims, whoever they end up taking, Laviska Shenault, whoever they end up getting, Odell's going to probably be better than them, but the thing is value. If you're getting Laviska Shenault for $2.5 million and Odell Beckham for 15, instead of focusing on Odell versus Laviska, let's focus on Odell plus Laviska plus another player you get for $4 million, plus another player for $5 million, plus another player, let's say a linebacker for $4 million, a guard for $5 million, and a safety for $4 million. Like, if you put all that together, it becomes fairly obvious why a team would be reluctant to go get Odell Beckham for more than a second-round pick, or get DeAndre Hopkins for more than a second-round pick. Like, I don't know, Bill O'Brien, or the Buffalo Bills, who just acquired Stephon Diggs for a first-round pick, which is a fascinating situation because it shows the market correcting itself. But also Buffalo has, at least under Brandon Beane, been a smarter organization, except for the whole Nathan Peterman situation, but that's a whole different situation. That might be more of a McDermott problem than anything else. But overall, this is a sign of the wide receiver market correcting itself, and Odell Beckham going for a second rounder and a 5th rounder really consummates the idea that these guys just aren't that valuable when it comes to winning, and teams would rather put their eggs in other baskets or disperse that money around and get value at these positions than anything else. It's literally what the Niners are going to do when they trade DeForest Buckner and draft Javon Kinlaw. It's like, you're not just trading Buckner for Kinlaw, you're getting Kinlaw plus another defensive end, plus a left tackle, plus a corner. In combination with all that, they're willing to part with that situation to focus on the winning aspect of it. So market is correcting itself, and the smart organizations are figuring out that the way to win is the way the Eagles did it, the way the Chiefs did it, the way that the Patriots have been doing it for 20 years in terms of selectively paying their players. But we're talking about recent champions. The Patriots have done some of that. Now their cap's a little inflated because of that money that Tom Brady is eating up in dead salary cap. But overall, the market's starting to correct itself. You're not going to see Odell Beckham's traded for essentially 2 first-round picks, Jabril Peppers and the first-round pick last year. You're not going to see Jalen Ramsey's traded for 2 first-round picks. You're not going to see Khalil Mack go for 2 first-round picks. Khalil Mack more possibly, because the linebacking position is that significant. But finding value in these situations is tough, because there's not a fine line between the 23 pick and the 38 pick, but sometimes it can go from they totally overpaid to what the bleep is this guy doing in about the span of 15 draft picks. So it's a fine line to play, but judging from the situation that it is, the overall point still stands that you're not getting crazy $15 million contracts to wide receivers and therefore running backs anymore, and you're not going to get a deal for Odell Beckham or a player of such caliber that's going to be 2 first-round picks and a second or something crazy like that. The market just has kind of corrected itself over the last 2 off seasons.